On behalf of Crosscheck Media and BizTalk Today TV, welcome everyone to the Money Path. I am your host, Todd Schoenberger. Joining me today is Aquiles Larrea. He is the founder and CEO of Larrea Wealth Management. Achilles, you have an S&P 500 that's hovering near all-time highs right now. What's your read on the risk reward right now?
There's always risk. That's a given in the market just to begin with, but there's always rewards for people who are not timid. I mean, I myself today, I went in looking at high quality companies that were kind of getting beat up recently and went back in. People will talk about a lame duck Congress or a lame duck president. I'm going to talk about a market that's kind of a lame duck market right now, simply from the fact, Todd, that what we're seeing in the market right now is a lot of, it's kind of boring, not a ton happening right now. But the data that's forthcoming will be very interesting, whether a rate cut occurs or not, whether, economic data that's delayed comes into play. That's another thing that we'll keep a watch on. But overall, the trend has been very positive in spite of the pullback. The pullback was that correction that we just had recently was normal. It was actually a little delayed. And I expected it to happen sooner back in October, and it didn't happen till November. So once again, little bit of a lame duck session as we head into the holidays, and imagine Christmas is coming. We're hoping for that Santa Claus rally that usually happens, but we'll see.
Well, lame duck market, I like that. We'll definitely have to utilize that slogan. It's the first time I'm hearing it. But the where do you see investors most overconfident right now? And then the inverse of that, where are they just still too skeptical?
Well, I definitely the technology, and that's not going to change. Even with the recent overblown fears in artificial intelligence, they're still in their infancy right now. That sector as a whole. So a lot of investors understand that they're going to go into these companies, albeit maybe they're sticking a toe in, maybe they're not putting as much commitment as they were previously, but still, I'm the rumor mill that I'm hearing is that everybody's still getting into it because they know it's the future, Todd. It's not something that it's a gimmick or a gimme. I guess where the rubber will meet the road on artificial intelligence, in my opinion, is whether or not the AI boosts productivity, whether it not adds to the bottom line, which we'll know much, much later. I mean, a year from now, I think we'll know a little bit more on that. So you have to go in with the sense if you're an investor, you got to go in with the sense that there is going to be a lot of trepidation at this particular point. But if you are not timid about risk, this is the time. I mean, you hear about Microsoft not making this, the rumor was that we're not making that expenditure before, but they denied that. They say they're going in, they're not all in, but they are certainly very much in it. And the areas that we think are going to still lag right now, Todd, are going to be cyclicals. When it comes to different purchasing, like autos, for argument's sake, let's just take that as a for instance. You know, we're not seeing that kind of commitment. We're not seeing we're actually seeing auto dealerships, big purchases, cyclical, are struggling at this point. So we're not convinced that this is the area to be in. I also would add retail to that, but I've been wrong about retail before, and I'm the first one to admit it. But retail, although people will go and buy their Christmas shopping right now, and this is the quarter where these companies go back to black. What I feel, though, it's a very temporary thing, and that most retailers are still struggling with the internet question on how to maximize profits, productivity, and efficiency there. I mean, the talk is, I'll just give you, for instance, the talk is that Amazon may be ending their partnership with USPS. Where are they? How do they pick up the slack when it comes to that? Doesn't mean that they're not going to make money. It just means that, is there enough demand at this particular point? And that comes into question, and we'll see what happens in the future. We don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good point. So on the Fed meeting coming up next week, let's pivot to that because it's a critical Fed meeting. You have a number of Wall Street analysts that are still, I mean, it could go either way, it seems. I mean, unless you tell me differently. But what are you going to be listening for the most that's going to maybe change your mind on where the markets are headed?
Well, I mean, what they say about 84% that the Fed was going to do the cut. I think that it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen. I don't care what the governors are saying. I don't care what Powell's saying at this point. Inflation is not any stretch or means right now, Todd, under any control. It has been inching up. It's like a slow moving dragon, that's been asleep for a while, or it's been moving, but you didn't notice it. And it's moving and it's creeping up. I always use the rice bag as an example. 20-pound bag of rice at H Mart just a couple of months ago was $24. That same bag for 20-pound is 34, $36 now. And
Wow.
that is in less than 6 months that's occurred. So, if you don't think that inflation is going to have an effect on retail, on affordability, and the like, also throw into the mix the tariffs, and we could talk about that as well. The tariffs could be another thing where we're talking about high ticket items that would normally, let's just say they're $100. All of a sudden, they become 140, or they become $200 because the tariffs that are thrown. It affects all the high ticket items, that's for sure.
So what's your take on the labor market right now?
Well, the labor market's actually it's under serious pressure right now. This time of year, Todd, we see a lot of layoffs. This is nothing that we've never seen before, but we're seeing it happening more and more. And due to the lack of, shall we say, convictions by companies, they want to try always do more with less in terms of employees. So they try to get lean at this point, or they simply have overexpanded. A lot of things have created this perfect storm in terms of unemployment. We are seeing that increasing number. And the question now becomes, and this is the Fed's challenge, if we go and we do these cuts, are we going to throw the country into a recession? If we have to pivot and go in a different direction. So should we inject more money into the system and the like, or do we have to ask ourselves, what is the biggest challenge for the Fed at this particular point going forward? But I do see them doing a couple of more rate cuts, and also alluding to when if we have a new Fed chairman, as this administration has indicated,
Yeah.
then there's another particular thing that could occur there, where the hope is that, is this going to affect big ticket items like housing, buy cars, loans, and the like? But we don't know yet. We are, kind of guesstimating at this point.
Okay, yeah, and my apologies to the audience as well. I know we're having some technical difficulties. Achilles, your feed's going in and out, but I think I have you back now. So let me ask you this: the ADP number that came out yesterday, it is the lowest we've seen in over 2.5 years. Is your outlook then? Do you think that this ADP number is just noise, or Do you think that the Fed is going to come to the rescue though and really help push and maybe create an incentive for employers to go back and hire again?
You know, that's a good question. What I see, happening currently, when you see those ADP numbers, this is the private sector. It's a true indicator. It is not a leading indicator, but it is a true indicator of what boots on the ground are occurring at this particular point. The government is obviously a much broader measure as far as the numbers are concerned, but I think it creates good questions for the Fed going forward as to how much of cuts are they going to have to do. And the talk was that they weren't going to do any cuts going in December, but I think those numbers made it apparent that the opposite is going to be true at this particular point. I think the Fed doesn't really have a choice. They're going to have to make that cut. They have some other tools in their quiver. They have some other arrows in their quiver that they could use. But I think the cuts are the most effective means at this particular point going forward. And I also, by doing those cuts, they can in turn stimulate activity in the economy, stimulate growth, because if the overnight rates go down lower, there is more opportunity for big ticket items to be purchased, more housing starts, but once again, going back to the tariffs, is that going to affect? Because if you're building a home right now, those materials are not coming from the United States. They're coming from Canada, Mexico. They get shipped out to there and then sent back to the United States. So our tariffs could move against us in that point.
Yeah, it's a very good point there. So going into 2026, everybody that's been on these shows, I've been asking the same question. Give me your favorite theme for next year.
Yeah, technology is still the place to be. AI is one area, but you know what? I would look at, I talked about this on other media and on my own, quantum computing. I think quantum computing is very interesting. Think about it. You're riding a bike, and all of a sudden they stick a bike battery on it, and that thing is, for lack of a better word, 1,000 times faster than you could ever pedal. That's what quantum computing is like, because all of a sudden you had these processes that were normally accepted principles in computing, and then all of a sudden you have an amazing speed taking place. So that's just one area. Nuclear, we talked about that in the past, Todd. Can you imagine the portability? We're not talking about 3 Mile Islands anymore. We're talking about the portability where, you could have your own portable reactor, kind of like Back to the Future, where they put it on the car, so you create a nuclear reactor that's the size of a shed,
That
so I mean, that's not unlikely in the future. We also are looking, beyond those two. I've talked about this before. I went on record last month on a show and I said, Caterpillar, infrastructure plays. Infrastructure is very interesting because at some point we still have to fund these infrastructure throughout the country.
yeah.
Bridges and roads are falling apart, Todd. We need to fund that. So Caterpillar is one of the direct beneficiaries of that. We also like in the space, in a different space, we like aerospace, we like Boeing, we like companies like Raytheon always, because we believe that the conflicts that occur throughout the world, although heartbreaking in some areas, create opportunities for companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and the like. So we want to be involved in on that as well. Now, another and the final thing that I'll just bring to bear for 2026, can you imagine Look at what just happened with Google and Nvidia. All right. And I say, why pick one? Let's own them both. You will win, because if one chip becomes the standard and the other chip becomes just a second fiddle to it, who cares? If I own them both, I'm going to make money in that, take advantage of that competition. Competition, Todd, is wonderful for businesses. That's how the United States has always stayed ahead of its competitors throughout the world, by being super competitive, being super productive, and having the right human capital leading the fray going forward.
Right, right. Very well said. I got to say, Achilles. Well, listen, we're going to cut it there. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Money Path. I wish you and your family a very happy holiday season. And I do
Same to
look
you,
forward.
Todd.
Thank you. And I do look forward to continuing this conversation in the new year. I can't wait to have you back.
My pleasure as always.
All right. So, on behalf of Aquiles Larrea, I am Todd Schoenberger. Thank you once again for joining us on the Money Path. And coming up tomorrow, Jim Bianco coming on live at 11 a.m., joining me for a one-on-one exclusive. You will not want to miss that show. All right. Until then, take care.